Jack had been stationed on Kepler 442b for exactly 3 months, and in that time, he'd learned 2 important things. The local beer tasted like engine coolant, and the street markets were the only place to get decent food. The colony's synthetic rations were technically nutritious, but they had all the flavor of recycled cardboard. So every Saturday, Jack made his way down to the sprawling bazaar in Sector 7, where vendors from a dozen different species hawked their wares under the orange-tinted sky. Today's mission was simple: buy some real meat for the weekend barbecue. His fellow engineers had been complaining about the food for weeks, and Jack had foolishly volunteered to solve the problem. The market was its usual chaos of colors, sounds, and smells. Vendors shouted in a babel of languages, both human and alien. Hover carts zipped between stalls, and somewhere in the distance, someone was playing what sounded like a saxophone crossed with a dying cat. Jack loved it. He navigated past a Venusian selling iridescent scarves, sidestepped a group of Centaurian children chasing each other, and finally found himself in the meat district. Rows of stalls displayed everything from familiar Earth chickens to things that definitely weren't from any planet humans had originated from. That's when he saw the cage. It was tucked between 2 butcher stalls, and at first Jack thought it was another animal pen. But then he looked closer. Inside the reinforced enclosure sat a woman, or at least something close to a woman. She had the general humanoid shape: 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 head. But her skin was a pale blue, and her hair seemed to shimmer with bioluminescence. Her eyes, large and silver, stared at nothing in particular. Jack's stomach turned. He'd heard about this, of course. Slavery was technically illegal in the Galactic Union, but indentured servitude and debt bondage were convenient loopholes that many species exploited. Humans had fought hard to outlaw such practices in their own colonies, but they were still outnumbered and outgunned in galactic politics. A Thrugian merchant, his forearms folded across his broad chest, noticed Jack's stare. "You interested, human?" "Fresh merchandise. Xylothan female. Very good worker. Very obedient." "I'm looking for meat," Jack said flatly. "Ah, but think of investment. She cook meat for you. She clean habitat. Only 30,000 credits." Jack was about to walk away when he made the mistake of looking at her again. The woman's eyes met his, and something in that gaze stopped him cold. It wasn't a plea for help exactly. It was resignation, the look of someone who'd already given up hope. He thought of his sister Jennifer back on Earth. She'd been widowed 2 years ago when her husband's mining ship had exploded. Jack remembered the hollow look in her eyes at the funeral, the way she'd seemed to be going through the motions of living without actually being alive. This alien woman had that same look. "What's her story?" Jack heard himself ask. The Thragian's eyes lit up, all 4 of them. Husband died in plasma mining accident. She had debts. Medical care for younglings, you understand. Choice was simple: pay debts or become payment. She has children? Had grown now. Debts remain. The Thragian tapped his data pad. She worked for you 10 years, debt paid. Very good deal. Jack's jaw clenched. 10 years. A decade of servitude for the crime of trying to save her kids. The rational part of his brain was screaming at him to walk away. 30,000 credits was his entire savings. It was meant for a down payment on a house back on Earth, for the life he'd been planning. But he kept thinking about Jennifer, about how she'd needed help, needed someone to remind her that life was worth living, about how their parents had taken her in, supported her, given her time to heal. 20,000, Jack said. And I want the debt documents transferred to me immediately. The Thragian's translator barely kept up with his rapid-fire negotiation tactics, but eventually they settled on 22,000. Jack's hand shook as he transferred the credits. What was he doing? He didn't even know this woman's name. The Thragian deactivated the cage. Congratulations on purchase. She is called Lyria. Speaks Galactic Common well. Lyria stepped out slowly, her movements cautious, as if expecting a trap. She was taller than Jack had realized, nearly 6.5 feet. She kept her eyes down, her posture submissive. "Follow," Jack said in Galactic Common, then immediately felt like a monster. He sounded like he was giving orders to a pet. They walked in silence back to his HAB unit on the colony's outskirts. Jack's mind raced. What was he supposed to do now? He'd just bought a person. Sure, his intentions were good, but the fact remained that he'd participated in the very system he despised. Once inside his small apartment, Jack gestured to the couch. "Please sit." Lyria looked confused but obeyed. She perched on the edge of the cushion, ready to spring up at a moment's notice. Jack pulled up a chair across from her. He took a deep breath and pulled out his data pad, accessing the debt documents. With a few keystrokes, he pulled up the contract and did something that made Lyria's eyes widen in shock. He deleted it. "You're free," Jack said. "The debt is gone. You don't owe me anything, and you don't owe that bastard anything either." Lyria stared at him, her bioluminescent hair flickering rapidly. I don't understand. Humans don't... Look, I know what you've probably heard about humans. We're aggressive, we're violent, we're unpredictable. All true, I guess. But we're also really, really stubborn about fairness." Jack leaned forward. "My sister lost her husband. She was broken. My family helped her because that's what you do. You don't leave people in cages." For a long moment, Lyria said nothing. Then slowly, her silver eyes filled with something Jack hadn't seen before. Tears. They were opalescent, catching the light as they rolled down her blue cheeks. "My name is Lyria Valsindra," she said, her voice stronger now. "I was a botanical engineer before everything. My husband Kren died when his safety pod failed during a solar flare. The medical bills for my children's radiation treatment." She shook her head. "I sold myself so they could live. Are they okay? Your kids?" "Yes, they're adults now working on Titan Colony. They think I'm dead. I told them that before I..." She couldn't finish the sentence. Jack stood up and walked to his kitchenette, pulling out 2 bottles of the terrible local beer. He handed one to Lyria. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to stay here tonight on the couch and I'll take the bedroom. Tomorrow we're going to contact your kids, and then we're going to figure out what you want to do next. But the debt is gone, Lyria, you're free. That's non-negotiable." Lyria took the beer with trembling hands. She looked at it, then at Jack, and for the first time she smiled. It was a small thing, tentative and fragile, but it was real. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you do this?" Jack thought about Jennifer, about the barbecue he'd never get to host because his savings were gone, about the house on Earth that would have to wait. He thought about all the small choices that made someone human, that made humanity worth defending in a cold, vast galaxy. "Because someone has to," Jack said simply. "And today that someone was me." Outside, the orange sun of Kepler 442b set below the horizon. In the morning, Jack would go back to the market. He still needed to buy meat after all. But tonight, he'd done something more important. He'd reminded himself why humanity deserved its place among the stars. And somewhere in a small apartment on the edge of a colony world, hope began to grow again.